I never imagined my life could shatter so quickly, especially at my ex-husband's family dinner. But there he was, standing across the room, Daniel, his younger brother. 10 years had passed, but his piercing gaze felt like no time had passed at all. When his eyes locked with mine, something shifted, something dangerous. I should have looked away, but I didn't, and that was my first mistake. Emily had always considered herself practical, someone who valued stability and predictability. At least, that's how life had been when she was married to Michael. They met in college, fell in love quickly, and built a life that seemed perfect on the outside. A house in the suburbs, Sunday barbecues, and vacations to the coast. But cracks had started to form long before the divorce papers were signed. Michael was ambitious, too ambitious. His work consumed him, leaving Emily alone most nights, pouring wine for one and scrolling through photos of happier times. She tried to talk to him, to fight for their marriage, but the distance only grew until it felt insurmountable. And when the truth finally surfaced that he had been seeing someone else, Emily walked away. The divorce was painful but necessary. She focused on rebuilding herself, channeling her energy into her interior design business. It became her sanctuary, her lifeline. By the time 2 years passed, Emily had convinced herself that she was finally over it, that her heart had healed. But all it took was one family dinner to shake her resolve. It had been Michael's mother's idea. She insisted Emily remain part of the family, especially for the sake of their daughter, Lily. Emily agreed, thinking it would be harmless. A brief appearance, some polite conversation, and then she could slip away. And that's when she saw him. Daniel. The last time she remembered him, he was just a boy, Michael's younger brother, quiet and shy, always lingering in the background. But now, standing across the room with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see right through her, he was anything but shy. "Emily," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered. Her breath caught. "Daniel." His smile was disarming, warm in a way that sent a ripple through her carefully guarded composure. As the night wore on, she tried to ignore the way he looked at her. Too long, too intently. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. A dangerous curiosity lingered in the air. Emily told herself it was nothing, a harmless reunion, a bit of nostalgia clouding her judgment. But as the evening wore on, Daniel's presence became harder to ignore. He was seated across from her at the dining table, his eyes catching hers more times than she cared to admit. Each glance lingered just a moment too long, leaving her pulse quickening and her thoughts scattered. She blamed the wine, the dim lighting, and the memories of her failed marriage, but deep down, she knew it wasn't any of those things. After dinner, the family gathered in the living room, but Emily excused herself, claiming she needed fresh air. Stepping onto the patio, she took a deep breath, hoping the cool night breeze would calm her restless thoughts. But then she heard footsteps. "I thought I'd find you out here," Daniel said softly, stepping onto the patio. Emily turned, startled by his presence. "Needed some air," she said quickly, clutching her wine glass as if it were a shield. He leaned against the railing, hands in his pockets, his gaze steady. "I get it. These family gatherings can be a lot." She forced a laugh. "You could say that." But he didn't laugh. Instead, he stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You seem different," he said after a moment. "Not in a bad way, just different." Emily felt her breath hitch. "People change," she replied, trying to sound casual. "Some don't." His voice was low, almost intimate. Her heart skipped. "Daniel." "I remember how happy you used to be," he interrupted, his eyes searching hers. "Before everything with Michael." His words hit like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just making conversation. He had been watching her, noticing her in ways she hadn't expected. "This is inappropriate," she said, her voice trembling as she tried to step back. But he didn't move. "Is it? Because I don't think it is." Emily's pulse raced as the space between them closed. She should have walked away. She should have ended the conversation and gone back inside. But instead she stayed, frozen, captivated by the intensity in his eyes. The sound of the sliding door opening jolted her back to reality. Michael's mother called out, looking for her. Emily pulled away from Daniel, her cheeks flushed and her mind spinning. For the rest of the night, she avoided him. But when she left the house and checked her phone later, there it was, a message from an unknown number. "Are you home safe?" Her hands trembled as she typed a response. "Yes. Thanks for checking." His reply came almost immediately. "I meant what I said tonight. You seem different. And I like it." Emily stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She knew she should shut it down, block his number, delete the message, and forget the look in his eyes. But she didn't. Instead, she typed back, "Thanks. It was nice seeing you too." And with that, the door to something dangerous had been left open. The texts didn't stop after that night. What began as casual exchanges about work and life quickly turned into something more. Daniel asked questions that no one else had dared to, about her marriage, her regrets, and the loneliness she had carried for years. And Emily answered, pouring out pieces of herself she hadn't shared with anyone, not even Michael. It wasn't just the words that pulled her in, it was the way Daniel made her feel seen, as if she weren't invisible anymore. The first time he showed up at her shop, Emily tried to convince herself it was innocent. He said he was in the area and thought he'd stop by to see her work. She believed him. At least, that's what she told herself as she led him inside. "This place suits you," he said, his eyes scanning the carefully arranged displays of fabrics and furniture samples. "Thanks," she replied, crossing her arms, suddenly aware of how close he was. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "It's not just the shop. You seem alive here. I like seeing you like this." Emily swallowed, her pulse racing. "Daniel, we can't." "Can't what?" he interrupted, his voice low. "Talk. Be honest." His hand brushed against hers, a feather-light touch that sent a jolt through her. Emily should have pulled away, should have ended whatever this was before it spiraled out of control. But she didn't. "Tell me to leave," he whispered, leaning closer. "And I will." She didn't say a word. The first kiss was hesitant, almost unsure. But when she didn't stop him, it deepened, turning desperate and hungry. Her back hit the counter as his hands tangled in her hair, and every logical thought vanished. When he finally pulled away, his breath was ragged. "I've wanted this for so long," he admitted, his eyes dark with need. Emily didn't trust herself to speak, so she kissed him again. After that night, there was no going back. What followed were stolen moments, texts that turned into late-night phone calls, accidental touches that became deliberate. And soon they were meeting in secret. The first time they checked into a hotel, Emily told herself it would be the last. But as she stood in the dimly lit room, watching Daniel loosen his tie and walk toward her, all she could think about was how alive she felt when he touched her. "This is insane," she whispered as he pulled her into his arms. "I know," he murmured, his lips trailing down her neck. "But tell me you don't want this." She couldn't. Every encounter was more intense than the last, a tangled mess of passion and guilt. Emily knew what they were doing was wrong, but she couldn't stop. She didn't want to. Daniel made her feel desired, seen, and wanted in ways Michael never had. He reminded her of the woman she used to be, the one who dreamed and laughed and believed in love. But the more time they spent together, the harder it became to hide. One evening, as they sat in her shop after hours, sharing a bottle of wine, a knock at the door shattered the illusion. Emily froze as she looked through the glass. It was her daughter, Lily. "Mom," Lily called, peering inside. Panic surged through Emily as she turned to Daniel. "Stay here," she whispered before opening the door. Lily's eyes scanned the room, lingering on the wine glasses and the way Emily's hair looked slightly disheveled. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Emily said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just working late." But the suspicion in Lily's eyes lingered long after she left. For the first time, Emily felt the weight of what she was risking. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily stared at the ceiling, her heart heavy with guilt. She knew this couldn't last. Eventually, someone would find out, and the fallout would destroy everything she had worked so hard to rebuild. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. "Daniel, can't stop thinking about you." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She knew what she should say, that it was over, that they had to stop. But instead she typed, "Me too." And with that, Emily crossed another line she couldn't uncross. Emily's world began to unravel the night Lily confronted her. She had just finished cleaning up the shop after another stolen moment with Daniel. The air still felt charged with his touch, and her pulse hadn't quite settled when the bell above the door jingled. "Mom!" Emily froze. Lily stood there, her eyes wide and filled with something Emily couldn't quite place: hurt, suspicion, and fear. "I need to talk to you," Lily said, stepping inside and locking the door behind her. Emily forced a smile. "What's wrong? You're acting strange." Lily didn't respond. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, sliding it across the counter. Emily's stomach dropped as she saw the image on the screen. It was a grainy photo, her and Daniel sitting too close in the lobby of a hotel. Their heads were bent toward each other, their expressions far too intimate to be mistaken for anything innocent. "Where did you get this?" Emily's voice shook. It doesn't matter, Lily said, her voice trembling. What matters is that it's real. Mom, tell me this isn't what it looks like. Emily opened her mouth to lie, to protect her daughter from the ugly truth, but the words wouldn't come. The weight of the past few months crashed down on her all at once, suffocating her. It's true, she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. I'm so sorry. Lily stepped back as if she'd been slapped. With Uncle Daniel? Are you kidding me? How could you do this? Lily, it's complicated, Emily pleaded. You don't understand. No, Lily snapped, her voice rising. I don't understand. Dad cheated, and you left him because of it. And now you're doing the same thing. With his brother? Emily flinched at the words, the truth of them cutting deeper than she expected. I never meant for this to happen, she said, her voice breaking. But it did. Lily's voice cracked. And now what? What happens to us? What happens when Dad finds out? The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Emily didn't have an answer. The fallout came faster than Emily could prepare for. Lily, too hurt and angry to keep the secret, confided in her father. And once Michael knew, the rest of the family wasn't far behind. Michael showed up at Emily's shop a few days later, his expression cold and calculating. Are you kidding me? He hissed. With my brother? Michael, please, Emily said, her voice trembling. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, he snapped. You're selfish, Emily. Do you even realize what this is doing to Lily? To our family? Tears filled Emily's eyes. I didn't plan this. I didn't mean for it to happen. But it did. Michael's voice was sharp. And now you're going to end it. The words hit like a punch to the gut. She knew he was right, knew she had already lost so much. But the thought of letting Daniel go felt like losing herself all over again. You don't get to control me anymore, Emily said, her voice trembling. This isn't about control, Michael shot back. This is about fixing the mess you made before it destroys everything. Later that night, Emily met Daniel at their usual spot. She told him everything, about Lily, about Michael's ultimatum, about how the walls were closing in. We can figure this out, Daniel said, his voice firm. No, we can't, Emily whispered. It's over. Daniel's face fell. You don't mean that. I do, she said, though every word felt like a lie. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about Lily. I can't lose her. So you're just going to walk away? He asked, his voice breaking. I have to. Daniel stared at her for a long moment before stepping back. Fine. If that's what you want. It's not what I want, Emily cried. It's what I need to do. But the look in his eyes, the hurt and betrayal, made her question whether she was making the right choice. Days turned into weeks, and Emily tried to move forward. She threw herself into her work, avoided family gatherings, and kept her distance from Daniel. But late at night, when the world was quiet, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She missed the way he made her feel, alive, seen, wanted. And then, just when she thought she had buried it all, a letter arrived at her shop. I can't stop thinking about you. I know we made mistakes, but what we had was real. And I'm not ready to give up on us. Daniel. Emily read it over and over, her heart pounding. She wanted to tear it up, to burn it and let it all go. But she couldn't. Instead, she found herself standing outside Daniel's apartment a week later, her hands trembling as she knocked on the door. When he opened it and saw her, his expression softened. Emily, he breathed. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. For the first time in weeks, she let herself stop thinking about consequences. She let herself feel. And as Daniel pulled her into his arms, she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a storm she wasn't sure she could survive. The aftermath of Emily's choices hit harder than she ever anticipated. Lily barely spoke to her, the hurt and betrayal evident in every glance and clipped response. She moved in with Michael temporarily, leaving Emily to face the emptiness of their home alone. Emily tried to fix it, leaving voicemails, sending texts, and showing up at Michael's house only to be turned away. But nothing worked. She needs time, Michael had said the last time she tried. And honestly, so do I. Emily knew he wasn't just angry, he was disappointed. She had become the villain in her own story, and no amount of explaining could rewrite what had happened. Her relationship with Daniel didn't fare much better. What had once felt exciting and forbidden now felt suffocating under the weight of guilt and judgment. Every time they were together, Emily's mind raced. Who might see them? Who might talk? What if Lily found out they hadn't stopped? One night, as they sat in Daniel's apartment, Emily finally cracked. This isn't working, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel looked up, startled. What do you mean? I mean this, us. She gestured between them. It's too much. It's hurting everyone, and I can't keep pretending it's okay. Daniel's face darkened. Hurting everyone or just hurting your image? That's not fair. Isn't it? He stood up, pacing the room. You knew what this was, Emily. We both did. But now that it's hard, you're just going to walk away? Emily stood too, her voice breaking. I don't have a choice, Daniel. I've already lost Lily. What if I lose everything else? My business? My reputation? What about me? He demanded. Don't I matter? The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken for far too long. You do, Emily said softly. But I can't keep sacrificing everything for this. I just can't. Daniel turned away, his shoulders tense. Then go, he said quietly. But don't come back when you realize you've made a mistake. Emily didn't respond. She just walked out, tears streaming down her face. Days turned into weeks, and the silence became unbearable. Emily poured herself into work, but it couldn't fill the void Daniel had left. She kept replaying their last conversation, wondering if she had made the right decision, or if fear had pushed her away from the only person who made her feel alive. But the cracks in her life didn't magically seal. Lily still kept her distance, though Emily noticed the occasional softening in her tone during their brief phone calls. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Michael, however, remained cold. He showed up at the shop one afternoon, catching Emily off guard. We need to talk, he said, his tone sharp. Emily tensed. What now? Lily's struggling, he said. And you're the reason why. The words stung, but Emily bit back a retort. I know I messed up, Michael. But don't act like you didn't. This isn't about me, he snapped. This is about her. And about you taking responsibility instead of running away every time things get hard. Emily swallowed her pride. What do you want me to do? Fix it, he said simply. Be her mother. As Michael left, Emily felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. She had spent so much time chasing what she thought she wanted that she had lost sight of what she needed, her daughter. That night, Emily sat down and wrote Lily a letter. She apologized, not just for the affair, but for all the ways she had failed her as a mother. She poured her heart onto the page, telling Lily how much she loved her and how desperately she wanted to fix things. She left it on Lily's doorstep, unsure if it would make a difference. A week later, Lily showed up at the shop. I read your letter, she said, her voice trembling. Emily held her breath. I'm still angry, Lily admitted. But I miss you. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she pulled Lily into a hug. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Emily didn't see Daniel again for months. She heard he had moved out of town, taking a job in another city. Part of her felt relieved. It made it easier to move on. But late at night, when the world was quiet and the weight of her choices lingered, she couldn't help but wonder. What if? What if she had fought harder for him? What if she had taken the risk instead of running away? The questions haunted her, but she knew there were no easy answers. Emily focused on repairing her relationship with Lily, pouring her energy into rebuilding their bond. She promised herself that this time she wouldn't take love for granted, that she wouldn't let fear guide her decisions. And yet, every so often, she caught herself looking at her phone, half expecting a text from Daniel. But it never came. Emily sat in her living room, the soft hum of the television filling the silence. It had been months since everything fell apart, but the echoes of those choices still lingered. She stared at the framed photo of Lily on the mantel, a bittersweet reminder of what she almost lost, and what she was still trying to rebuild. The letter she wrote had opened the door, but repairing the damage wasn't easy. Trust took time. Lily still kept her guard up, but their conversations were becoming more frequent, more genuine. Small victories, movie nights, shared dinners, felt monumental, and Emily held on to them like lifelines. But late at night, when the world grew quiet, Emily couldn't stop the questions that haunted her. Had she made the right choice letting Daniel go? The truth was, Emily didn't know. She missed him, the way he made her feel alive and wanted, the way he listened without judgment. But she also knew what they had built had been fragile, rooted in secrecy and passion rather than stability. And that kind of foundation was destined to crumble. She often wondered if Daniel had moved on, if he thought of her as much as she thought of him. But no messages came, no late-night calls. And maybe that was for the best. Michael, on the other hand, had found ways to weaponize her mistakes. He never openly attacked her, but his words always carried an undertone of judgment, especially when it came to Lily. You'll have to earn her trust back, he reminded her during one exchange. You don't just get to sweep this under the rug. And he was right. Emily had broken something precious, not just her marriage but her role as a mother. She had let herself get swept up in desire, ignoring the consequences until they were too big to fix. But she wasn't running anymore. One afternoon, Lily stopped by the shop unannounced. "Can we talk?" she asked hesitantly. Emily nodded, her heart racing. I need to understand," Lily said. "Why him? Why Uncle Daniel?" Emily sighed, choosing her words carefully. "Because for the first time in years I felt like someone really saw me." Lily frowned. But was it worth it? The question hung heavy in the air, and Emily didn't have an easy answer. "I don't know," she admitted. "But what I do know is that I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." For the first time, Lily's expression softened. "I believe you're sorry. But I need time." Emily nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'll wait as long as you need." Months later, Emily found herself sitting by the window of her shop, staring at the empty street outside. She had rebuilt her business, poured everything into her work to keep herself busy. But the quiet moments still left her restless. A letter arrived that day. No name, no return address. But she recognized the handwriting immediately. "I don't regret us. Not even for a second. But I do regret how much it cost you. I hope you're happy, Emily. You deserve to be. Daniel." Tears welled up in her eyes as she folded the letter and tucked it away. It wasn't closure, not entirely, but it was something. A reminder that what they had was real, even if it couldn't last. Emily learned the hard way that desire and love don't always follow the rules. Sometimes they lead you to unexpected places, forcing you to confront the parts of yourself you tried to ignore. But in the end, the consequences of chasing forbidden feelings always catch up. She wasn't the same woman she had been when it all started, restless, lonely, and longing for escape. She was stronger now, wiser. And while she still carried regrets, she also carried hope. Hope that Lily would one day forgive her completely. Hope that she could move forward without looking back. And hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd find love again, this time without losing herself in the process. What would you have done if you were in Emily's shoes? Could you walk away from a love that felt so real, even if it came at a cost? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to hear more shocking, emotional, and forbidden love stories like this one.